Today we'll be looking at a Sorlock build meant to emulate the powerful Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. A naturally talented caster and willing to go to any length in her pursuit of greatness, Azula fits well into the world of Baldur's Gate 3 and provides a fun roleplay option for a more sinister playthrough. Over here in the character creators, we start to build out Azula. You have the choice of any race that you want, of course, and a lot of them have a lot of great benefits. Now, Drow and Elf have certain additional spellcasting abilities and resistance to charm that can be very helpful. Get the Yankee's going to give you some extra skill abilities as well as some extra armor proficiencies, which would be very useful for this build. Dwarf can get you dark vision or extra HP depending on what you choose. Dragonborn is going to get you a great dragon breath attack, which is fantastic. And half orc might be maybe my personal favorite class in the game from just an ability standpoint, definitely not a visual standpoint, but relentless endurance and savage attacks are fantastic abilities that are good on any character. That being said, I am going to stick to the roleplay of Azula, so we'll be sticking with human. When it comes to class, I am going to go with Warlock to start. We'll be taking our first 5 levels in Warlock and then dipping elsewhere. We do need to select 2 cantrips for our Warlock build. I went ahead and selected Blade Ward 1. I don't think a lot of these cantrips really make a ton of sense for the roleplay, so Blade Ward probably makes the most sense, just readying yourself to defend against an attack. And then I also selected Eldritch Blast, one because we're a Warlock and not having that would be almost like a cardinal sin, but because Azula does shoot fire and lightning and the picture is crackling red lightning coming off of a hand, I think that's close enough to where we can just pretend that this force is fire, or it's just the force of her pure casting abilities. As for subclasses, I went with Fiend. Now, you do have the option to go with the Great Old One. I think that this might be a slightly better fit. Mortal Reminder as a subclass feature. When you land a critical hit, you're going to frighten people around you, or enemies around you, which is fantastic for this roleplay. However, I also think Dark One's Blessing makes sense, where Azula would be gaining HP when destroying a hostile enemy, which I think makes a lot of sense, because this is somebody who kind of revels in the fight. I think they both make a lot of sense, and the Fiend has access to more fire moves, especially Fireball at 3rd level spells, and I think that just pushes the Fiend over the top for me. Now, as far as our first 2 spells go, I am going to select Burning Hand, and then I think you probably have the choice between Command. This is somebody who leads military troops and is quite demanding and commanding. And you could also select something like Hellish Rebuke, which makes a lot of sense. And then if you just want to kind of lean into the Warlock aspect of it, you can select Hex. I'm going to select Command. I think it fits the vibe of this roleplay very much. And then we'll move on to our background, where I think Noble is probably the most obvious choice. This is somebody who is literally a princess, but I think Soldier fits more for her character in the show. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, Azula is seen constantly hunting, leading military groups on battleships, traveling the globe as a soldier, actively hunting somebody. I think it makes a lot more sense, and then it works a lot better with the skills as well. So, when it comes to abilities, the first thing to note is that Strength and Wisdom are both dumped. I think Wisdom is not something Azula is known for in the television show, and she is a slighter frame, more of a finesse fighter in hand-to-hand combat. That being said, extremely dexterous, so we're going to give a 16 there. This is somebody who never gives up on a fight, so we're going to go ahead and give 14 Constitution, somebody who fights until the bitter end. Intelligence is 12. This is somebody who is studied and would be more learned than the average person coming from a royal background. And then Charisma at 16. Now, this is not a traditional bard charisma where you're playing a song and persuading people. This is more of a deception, intimidation, and generally just dishing out orders kind of charisma. So not your traditional bard charisma, but still very charismatic and influential, which leads us into our skill proficiencies, where I would immediately go ahead and select Deception. We get Intimidation from the soldier background, and then sort of the rest of the choices are yours. Now you could go ahead and select Survival. This is somebody who's seen constantly hunting throughout the show, somebody who would need to be in the field surviving. You could go with Perception or Insight if you want this to be sort of the face of your party. You could also go with something like Animal Handling if you wanted to, like I said, if it's going to be the face of your party, it might make sense. For me, I would probably just go with Insight because I would be using this as a face character. I'm going to be talking to people. That +1 is going to be helpful. And then as your additional human one, not a lot of great options here. We'll just stick with Arcana. This is somebody who has studied bending a lot and would know a lot about spellcasting. So let's head over to the actual character and we'll build her up to level 12. As we begin to level up our character at level 2 for Warlock, we will get the option for a new spell as well as our Eldritch Invocations. I'm going to go ahead and select Hellish Rebuke, which is nice because it gives us the ability to do damage with our reaction, which is always nice. However, it does also fit the roleplay really, really well. The idea of retaliating with fire, which is, in my opinion, really fits. But if you want to be an Eldritch Blaster, Hex probably makes more sense for you, or you could go ahead and select something like Armor of Agathis if you want to do. Be a little bit more tanky while still dealing out all that damage. As far as our Eldritch Invocations go, I'm going to go ahead and select Agonizing Blast. This is Warlock 101. It should be your first take for Warlock abilities basically every time, making your Eldritch Blast that much more powerful. And I just went ahead and selected Armor of Shadows as well. This is a character that starts off with high dex, so the idea of being unarmored with mage armor sounds quite nice and will probably give us good early game defensive capabilities. If we hadn't already selected Deception, I would probably have selected Beguiling Influence. You could also select something like Repelling Blast if you want to use your blasts to move people around the battlefield. Moving on to level 3, we'll have our chance at another spell as well as a packed boon. So for our spell, I'm going to select Scorching Ray. I think it really fits the RP. If you hadn't selected Armor of Agathis and wanted to, you certainly could. Personally, I think that Cloud of Daggers is one of the best early game crowd control spells. So if you're not strictly sticking to the RP, you can go ahead and grab that. Of course, Hold Person is a fantastic move as well and can fit into the RP as just sort of trapping somebody. So it also makes sense. And then Misty Step is sort of an S tier move. So that's always a good option there. Like I said, I'm going to stick with Scorching Rays for the RP. And then for Pact Boon, I'm going to select Pact of the Blade. I do want to get extra attack from this. This will allow us to use our spellcasting modifier, which actually for this build right now does not matter as we have 16 dex. It also allows us to bind our Pact weapon, which is nice because we do get a little bit of extra abilities for certain weapons within the game that need to be bound, and we can't drop our weapon, which occasionally will come in handy. You, of course, do have the ability to replace a spell as well, but we're not going to at this point. We don't have a lot of options. As we move to level 4, we will get our first feat, as well as a new cantrip and spell. For the cantrips, I just went ahead and selected True Strike. You can go ahead and select whatever you want. Nothing really fits the RP here, so just select anything that you find useful. I'm not a big cantrip guy, especially with Warlocks. You're probably just going to be using Eldritch Blast when in doubt. As far as spells go, like I mentioned earlier, Whole Person can be worked into the RP as just sort of capturing, imprisoning, or binding somebody, so I think that makes a lot of sense. You could also probably say that Misty Step for an extremely mobile character or a Mirror Image for an extremely mobile character also probably makes sense, but really sticking to the RP, I'm going to go with Hold Person. As far as feats go, I think Ability Improvement probably makes the most sense, but you can go ahead and select something like Elemental Adept Fire if you really wanted to. We don't have any other damage types except for fire and force right now, so it probably makes a little bit of sense. You could also go ahead and do something like Spell Sniper, but at this point, when we have our bound pact weapon, I think it just makes sense to give that +2 bonus to charisma. That's going to give us bonus to damage with our spells and damage with our weapons, thanks to the Pact of the Blade. Moving on to level 5, our last level with Warlock, we get a new spell and a new Eldritch Invocation. The natural choice here for our spell is going to be Fireball. 8d6 damage at level 5 is fantastic. This will be our last level in Warlock, so if you want to take any of these spells for your builds, do it now, because we're not doing any more Warlock levels. As far as our Eldritch Invocation goes, I think it probably makes sense to do something like Repelling Blast. We do have new options, the ability to curse or the ability to slow, but I think being able to sort of push people back into trouble or knock them off of cliffs is extremely useful when it comes to Warlock builds. On to level 6, and this is where we are going to exit Warlock and we are going to take a quick dip into the Cleric class. Now, I know what you're thinking. You think of Cleric, you think of Holy Warrior, you think of defending the people, but there's a lot of gods out there that aren't so nice. So we have 3 cantrip choices as well as some spell choices and subclass and deity, so a lot of choices here. I think the natural choice, of course, is Produce Flame. And then when it comes to the other choices, Sacred Flame also has the word flame in it, so I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And then I think something like Thaumaturgy makes sense giving you advantage on intimidation checks. You could also select guidance because it's always useful to have, or resistance because likewise it is fairly useful to have. I'm going to go with this because Azula is very intimidating. When it comes to subclass, we are going to select the Tempest domain strictly because it gives us the ability that comes at level 2. It also gives us a reaction right away, Wrath of the Storm, which allows us to retaliate with 2 to 16 damage in either lightning or thunder, and it's also going to give us some base level spells, which I think mildly fit into the RP, but it's mostly going to be about our level 2 gains here. As far as deity goes, I'm going to be honest, I don't do a lot of research into the deities of this realm. Go ahead and pick the evilest one that you can find. This one has a bunch of dragon heads. It looks pretty evil. I'm going to go ahead and select that one. And then as far as our prepared spells go, I think the only thing that I would probably note for this part is if you want to play the RP, don't pick something like Create Water or Bless. This is not that type of character. They're also not going to be... also, with your extremely low wisdom, it's not going to be something where you're going to select something like Bane. It's not going to land very often. So I think it probably makes the most sense to select something that's kind of neutral, something like Sanctuary. Something where you can't get hurt. Something like Shield of Faith, something that buffs your armor class by 2 regardless of what your wisdom stat is. I'm going to go ahead and select Sanctuary because I think when somebody gets up from being downed, this is extremely useful. Of course, you could also select Inflict Wounds, but with such low wisdom, it probably wouldn't make the most sense. So we'll move on to level 7 and get our Seminal ability. So at level 7, we will be Cleric Tempest level 2, and you'll see right here we get that key subclass feature. So that key feature is Destructive Wrath. When you roll thunder or lightning damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead. This is going to come in clutch when we get to our final level. Our ultimate build, at the very end, will have the ability to maximize lightning damage extremely well. We also have the ability Turn Undead. Not an ability I use very much and also doesn't fit the RP particularly well. You have the choice to change deity if you're not happy with it, and then we don't get any additional spell slots because we have such low wisdom, so we'll just stick with Sanctuary. And that's going to be it for Cleric. As we move into our 8th level, we're going to immediately hop over to Sorcerer. So through Sorcerer, we're going to get some cool abilities as well as some unique or some good spells. We're going to get a lot more cantrips. Like I said, we're kind of running out of usability for cantrips, but as a sorcerer, these will be slightly more useful because we're using Charisma. Firebolt makes a ton of sense here. We can go ahead and just add in Light and Friends if in case we want to be the face of the party, and then I'll just go ahead and toss Poison Spray on there in case that's a battle tactic that we want to use. Probably not going to use any of those cantrips, especially since this is like our 10th cantrip at this point. But we do get spells, which is absolutely fantastic. We do already know quite a few. I think Shield is kind of a must whenever you pick Wizard or Sorcerer. You kind of have to go with Shield. We already do get a free cast of Mage Armor from our Eldritch Invocation, so I'll just go ahead and select something like Chromatic Orb because we can change that to Fire or Lightning, and it will still fit into the build. And then when it comes to our subclass, I thought for a while here, I thought for these first two, they actually make sense. Wild Magic, this is somebody who does not control her emotions particularly well. So Wild Magic might make sense, sort of not caring about any collateral damage on the battlefield. I also think that Draconic Bloodline makes sense. This is somebody who is from a historic, legendary background, named after I think it was King Azula, Emperor Azula. So this is somebody with a fantastic Fire Nation background. But then, when it comes to Storm Sorcery, I think this makes the most sense because you get Tempestuous Magic. After you cast a level 1 spell or higher, you can fly as a bonus action, which is fantastic. And Azula is seen throughout the show using her firebending as a sort of propulsion system to move around the map. And the way that fly is displayed in this game, I think actually fits that. You sort of fly from point to point. You are not constantly flying. You sort of zoom over to one spot and land. So I think that really fits Azula's kind of Fire Nation propulsion ability very well and gives her some fantastic mobility. As we move to level 2 Sorcerer, we're going to get a new spell, and we're also going to get our Meta Magics. So first off, for spells, I'm probably just going to go ahead and select Magic Missile. We are starting to get quite a conglomerate of low-level spells here, so I'm not going to worry too much about these. Magic Missile is just nice to have for free damage in your back pocket. If you wanted to sort of lean into the malice of Azula, you could probably do Ray of Sickness, or the trickery of Azula, you could probably do Sleep, but at this point, the ritual spells are probably just as viable as well. The real thing here is meta magic. As you can see, I already selected twin spells because it is so useful to target multiple people. I personally think extended spells not that great. Most conditions last fairly long and most battles are fairly short, so I don't think that it's a really amazing ability. Distance spell, most of the time you can just move into range if you need to. Very infrequently have I used distance spell in my playthroughs, so I would probably just go for careful spell. If you want to go ahead and toss a fireball onto your barbarian, you give him an automatic save, which is nice. You'll have the ability to replace a spell, but we're not going to do that here. So with 3 more levels to go, we're going to get to level 3 of Sorcerer. We have the option at higher level spells now. None of them fit particularly well. I think something like Enhanceability might make sense. Something like Enlarge Reduce might also make sense. Make us a little more intimidating. Maybe her rage takes her over and she seems almost bigger than she was before. Or if you want to be a more stealthy build, you could do something like Invisibility. Or of course, if you are a frontliner, you can do Mirror Image. I'm just going to select Misty Step because I think the idea of quickly moving somewhere else is unparalleled. And at this point, none of these spells for the second tier level fit perfectly, so we might as well just pick the best one that we can. And then we get an additional meta magic, and this is where the ultimate meta magic comes in. Quicken Spell. Cast a spell as a bonus action for 3 sorcery points. Unbelievably powerful, and will be useful if we ever need to dump spells. So 2 levels to go. Let's keep moving, and we can get this build finalized. 4 for Sorcerer, level 11 overall. We get another cantrip and another spell. Go ahead and toss any cantrip you want in there. We got all of them at this point. And same thing for level 2 spells. Not a lot of them fit great. Darkness, like I said, if you want to be Darkness and Invisibility, if you want to be stealthy, if you want to be frontliner, get some Mirror Image. If you want to be the face or assist the face, go ahead and be Enhanceability. If you need some Cloud of Daggers to help crowd control, go ahead and pick whatever you want. I'll pick Enlarge Reduce because this feels like a selfish character. So why not make ourselves huge and do more damage? More importantly, we are going to get an additional feat. Now, this is a tough one because it is going to be our last feat. So we have a very tough choice here. Of course, Ability Improvement will knock us up to 20 for Charisma, which is huge, especially for a Pact-bound Warlock. But if you needed some additional movement, you could definitely grab Mobile. If you were having trouble with concentration spells, you could grab something like Warcaster or Resilient. Or if you wanted to crit more often, you could grab Spell Sniper. I think personally, though, that as a Warlock with weapon damage using Charisma and spells using Charisma, I think it is just too much to pass up on that Charisma buff being maxed out. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we'll focus mostly on damage, which is what Azula is all about. Burn it all down. Arriving at our last level, level 5 Sorcerer, we are going to pick up one additional spell, which will give us our Seminal ability. Azula is known for being such a terribly powerful firebender that she can actually wield lightning directly, known as the cold-blooded firebending, something that is as lifeless as lightning. Lightning Bolt will be sort of the seminal ability, and since that is paired with our Tempest Cleric, we will be able to maximize that damage and guarantee it is 48 damage every time we cast it, at least once, or maybe twice, depending on your choice of armor. So that is completing Azula's build. Let's get into the field and see just how powerful we can get her. Alright, here we are with Azula ready to battle, and the first thing that I did want to point out is that because of the way that this is built, we do not have 5th and 6th level spell slots, but what we do have is a lot of middle level spell slots. We have 3 3rd level spell slots naturally and a 4th level spell slot as well as 2 Warlock 3rd level spell slots, so we're going to get those back every short rest. So this is not a character that's going to get those really high leveling spells, but you can use something like Fireball twice in a battle, short rest, and you could use it twice again. And then if you needed to, you would have 3 non-Warlock spell slots that you could cast it with, meaning that if you needed to absolutely go crazy in a battle, you could theoretically drop 6 Fireballs in one battle, and then short rest and have 2 more fireballs next battle. So a lot of versatility with sort of those recurring spell slots as well as your natural sorcerer spell slots. But as far as items, I didn't go ahead and deck her out. This is not a build that's designed to be only good at level 12. This is supposed to be good throughout the game. At level 5, you will have Fireball with level 3 spell slots, so you will be sort of ready to go. So I just gave her a hodgepodge of a few items that I think fit her vibe. First of all, the Cindermoth Cloak's going to burn anybody that damages you from close range. Very fitting. She's a firebender. The Graceful Cloth just gives bonus to Dex, which I think really helps with this build. Somebody who's going to be both in combat and fighting from a distance. Killer Sweetheart's going to guarantee that crit. I think that fits very well her sort of evil vibe. The evil character always seems to land one devastating strike at some point in the battle to make things more difficult. And then just 2 murderous cuts. I think aesthetically they make a lot of sense. She's got these 2 cool daggers. But also they do bonus damage when the enemy is below 50 HP, which sort of leans into that ruthlessness. You can also boost her charisma with this endgame item, which I originally was going to do, but she looks like a very, very stupid witch. So I'm not going to give that to her. Alright, here we are ready to fight with Azula. I'm not going to go ahead and show you 1,000 fireballs, even though, like I mentioned, you could theoretically drop 6 in one battle, which is very nice. I'm just going to show off sort of the seminal abilities because I think that those are kind of the whole reason why I built the build. Azula is a master of lightning, so we'll show that off first with our Destructive Wrath, maximizing that damage. Of course, our good friend Benji here did save and then heal, so I guess they don't even care that I just lightning bolted them. But Fitzpatrick does, and he'll allow us to show off Tempestuous Magic. So anytime we cast a spell, we'll be able to bonus action hop somewhere. So if we were trying to get a vantage point or get away from this gentleman here, we could just fly right on up there, and we'll have to make Fitzpatrick come to us, which is great. Or it's probably going to be most useful for getting a great spot to land your fireballs. Now that he's in range, I'm just going to try and provoke an opportunity attack and see if he hits us, which he does, which will allow me to show off the fact that we can use a level 3 spell slot here, and just, it's not even our turn, just as a reaction, we can fire damage this guy, which is awesome. It will give us a free flight, even though that was as our in-between sort of battle, which allows us to get fantastic mobility, and then we can go ahead and finish him off with any move that we want, although I don't think he's going to die here. But we'll just always have that bread and butter Warlock Agonizing Blast with push attached to it, which is fantastic. So that kind of ends this section here. If there's any build that you think is a better option, if there's any TV show, manga, or anime that you want to show builds from or see builds from, please let me know. I've been having a blast doing this. I just started making these builds on my own because I was like, I like Avatar, and then I figured I'd show them off to people, and you guys seem to like it. So if you have not, please like, comment, and subscribe, especially with new build ideas that you'd love to see, because I would love to dive into those. That being said, everybody have a good day, and I will see you shortly.